may refill. A Hegel, after identifying himself for a moment with the absolute idea, is in his essence no less subject to sleepiness, irritation, and death than if he had been modestly satisfied with the joys of an oyster. But it is only their common form, or their common worship, that can give the quick moments of life any mutual relevance or sympathy, and existence would not come at all within sight of a good, either momentarily or final, if it were not inwardly directed upon realizing some definite essence. For the rest, this essence may be as simple as you will. If the nature directed upon it is unified and simple, it would be merely intellectual snobbery to condemn pleasure because it has not so many subdivisions in it as an encyclopedia of the sciences. For the moralist, pleasure and pain may even be the better guides, because they express more directly and boldly the instinctive direction of animal life, and thereby mark more clearly the genuine difference between good and evil. We may well say with Bradley that the good is self-realization. But what is the self? Certainly not the feeling or consciousness of the moment, nor the life of the world, nor pure spirit. The self that can systematically distinguish good from evil is an animal soul. It grows from a seed. Its potentiality is definite and its fate precarious. And in man it requires society to rear it, and tradition to educate it. The good is accordingly social, in so far as the soul demands society. But it is the nature of the individual that determines the kind and degree of sociability that is good for him, and draws the line between society that is a benefit and society that is a nuisance. To subordinate the soul fundamentally to society, or the individual to the state, is sheer barbarism. The Greeks, sometimes invoked to support this form of idolatry, were never guilty of it. On the contrary, their lawgivers were always reforming and planning the state so that the soul might be perfect in it. Discipline is a help to the spirit, but even social relations, when like love, friendship, or sport they are spontaneous and good in themselves, retire as far as possible from the pressure of the world, and build their paradise apart, simple, and hidden in the wilderness; while all the ultimate hopes and assurances of the spirit escape altogether into the silent society of nature, of truth, of essence, far from those fatuous worldly conventions which hardly make up for their tyranny by their instability. For the prevalent moral fashion is always growing old, and human nature is always becoming young again. World worship is the expedient of those who, having lost the soul that is in them, look for it in things external, where there is no soul; and by a curious recoil it is also the expedient of those who seek their lost soul in actual consciousness, where it also is not. For sensations and ideas are not the soul, but only passing and partial products of its profound animal life. Moral consciousness, in particular, would never have arisen, and would be gratuitous, save for the ferocious bias of a natural living creature defending itself against its thousand enemies. Nor would knowledge in its turn be knowledge, if it were merely intuition of essence, such as the sensualist, the poet, or the dialectician may rest in. If the imagery of logic or passion ever comes to convey knowledge, it does so by virtue of a concomitant physical adjustment to external things; for the nerve of real or transcendent knowledge is the notice which one part of the world may take of another part, and it is this momentous cognizance, no matter what intangible feelings may supply terms for its prosody, that enlarges the mind to some practical purpose and informs it about the world. Consciousness then ceases to be passive sense or idle ideation, and becomes belief and intelligence. Then the essences which form the content of consciousness may be vivified and trippingly run over, like the syllables of a familiar word. in the active recognition of things and people, and of all the ominous or pliable forces of nature. For essences, being eternal and non-existent in themselves, cannot come to consciousness by their own initiative, but only as occasion and the subtle movements of the soul may evoke their forms; so that the fact that they are given to consciousness has a natural status and setting in the material world, and is part of the same natural event as the movement of the soul and body which support that consciousness. There is therefore no need of refuting idealism, which is an honest examination of conscience in a reflective mind. Refutations and proofs depend on pregnant meanings assigned to terms, meanings first rendered explicit and unambiguous by those very proofs or refutations. On any different acceptation of those terms, these proofs and refutations fall to the ground, and it remains a question for good sense, not for logic at all, how far the terms in either case describe anything extant. If by knowledge we understand intuition of essences, idealism follows, but it follows only in respect to essences given in intuition. Nothing follows concerning the seat, origin, conditions, or symptomatic value of such intuition, nor even that such intuition ever actually occurs. Idealism, therefore, without being refuted, may be hemmed in and humanized by natural knowledge about it and about its place in human speculation. The most recalcitrant materialist, like myself, might see its plausibility during a somewhat adolescent phase of self-consciousness. Consciousness itself he might accept and relish as the natural spiritual resonance of action and passion, recognizing it in its proud isolation and specious autonomy, like the mountain republics of Andorra and San Marino. German idealism is a mighty pose, an attitude always possible to a self-conscious and reflective being, but it is hardly a system, since it contradicts beliefs which in action are inevitable. It may therefore be readily swallowed, but it can never be digested. Neither of its two ingredients, romantic skepticism and romantic superstition, agrees particularly with the British stomach. Not romantic skepticism, for in England an instructive distrust of too much clearness and logic, a difficulty in drawing all the consequences of any principle, soon gave to this most radical of philosophies a prim and religious air. Its purity was alloyed with all sorts of conventions, so much so that we find British Hegelians often deeply engaged in psychology, cosmology, or religion, as if they took their idealism for a kind of physics, and wished merely to reinterpret the facts of nature in an edifying way, without uprooting them from their natural places. This has been made easier by giving idealism an objective, non-psychological turn. Events, and especially feelings and ideas, will then be swallowed up by the essences which they display. Thus Bradley maintained that two thoughts, no matter how remote from each other in time or space, were identically the same, and not merely similar, if only they contemplated the same idea. Mind itself ceased in this way to mean a series of existing feelings, and was identified with intelligence, and intelligence in its turn was identified with the idea, or logos, which might be the ultimate theme of intelligence. There could be only one mind, so conceived, since there could be only one total system in the universe visible to omniscience. As to romantic skepticism, we may see by contrast what it would be, when left to itself, if we consider those lucid Italians who have taken up their idealism late and with open eyes. In Croce and Gentili, the transcendental attitude is kept pure. For them there is really no universe save spirit creating its experience, and if we ask whence or on what principle occasions arise for all this compulsory fiction, we are reminded that this question, with any answer